Richard Mille watches are expensive, no secret. But the watches I'm about to bring up on the screen are 7 of the most expensive watches that Richard Mille has to offer. Let me put it this way. The top 1% of the richest people, of the top 1%, think twice about buying these watches. According to the Morgan Stanley report 2023, Richard Mille's turnover was $1.77 billion, with an estimated 5,600 watches sold. Get the average, $275,000 per watch. That's an insane average. There's no watch company out there that can have that type of average on a single watch sold. So let's jump into it.
Guys, 7 ridiculously expensive watches, Richard Mille watches. You won't believe that they even exist. Ever wondered how the ultra elite flex their wealth? Well, these 7 mind-blowing Richard Mille watches are so exclusive, even the top 1% of the 1% thinks twice before splurging on them. Let's take a look at these watches. They have some eye candy for you to enjoy and just beautiful designs that you'd think like, wow, is this fun or is this luxury or is this class? Yes. Yes, it is all 3.
I'm gonna go back to 2012 and I'm gonna start with the OG Sapphire Tourbillon. Again, the case was made from a solid block of crystal, and that's an amazing feat in its own. 3-part case, front, back, sides, milled from a single piece of crystal. The margin of error on that is just insane. I wonder how many cases they actually cracked before they were able to actually put a single watch together. It was a limited edition of 5 pieces made to celebrate the 10-year relationship with Felipe Massa and Richard Mille. The retail back then was, I'm gonna say, somewhere in the low ones. But this was at a time where Richard Mille wasn't that hot, and believe it or not, the first time I got my hands on an RM56, I ended up selling the watch for roughly about $900,000 in trade, actually below its retail value. But we know as the market moved, things quickly changed for Richard Mille. And let's jump to the next guy, the 5601. They came out literally the following year. They took the whole thing to the next level. Outside of the full crystal case, what did they do? They make the base plate, the bridges, and a third wheel, also in full sapphire. Again, limited to 5 pieces once again. That sticker price came in at $1.95 million. At a later time, they came out with some colorful ones. Most notably, you saw Jay-Z wearing a blue one.
Shaboy!
The blueprint. There was a green sapphire version of that and J Balvin's brown sapphire version of the 5601. The piece uniques, there's really no price to them. And I'll tell you like this, on a secondary, I know of a blue and a green and a brown that sold to the tune of $5 million, yes. And I know this because we sold 2 of them. So following the 5601, what's the next logical thing was? The 5602. They kept all the sapphire. They updated it with that groundbreaking cabled movement where literally the movement is held by cables, similar to what you saw in the Rafael Nadal Tourbillon 2701, which we'll talk about later. $2.02 million price tag on this item, and ooh, is this thing just unbelievably, oh. Also in 2012, they debuted what's called the Skull series, which was a skull tourbillon. Now, contrary to all belief, the skull wasn't just decorative. The skulls and bone sculpture was actually part of the movement. Parts of the skull serve as a base plate, and the bridges where the upper and the lower skulls hold the tourbillon case ruby. And the back of the head is the movement center bridge. And peeking behind the skull are 4 bones, which are in fact 4 bridges that connect the movement to the case. Originally, they released this in a series of 21 pieces, and the retail price tag was $500,000. We have sold the skull tourbillons, depending on their variations, anywhere from $1 million to $2 million. Just to put that in perspective. Of course, in Richard Mille fashion, other series of the skull watch has joined the lineup to, once again, include the crystal version. Retail around the $2 million price range, and on the market they were anywhere from $4 to $5 million. And what you see on the screen is a 5204 blue sapphire. Absolutely ridiculously amazing looking watch. They are ridiculously expensive, don't get me wrong, but the horology is still there. The 5205 was the Pharrell watch that everybody raved about. And that featured an astronaut instead of a skull. Again, same type of horology. The tie between Pharrell and Richard Mille was a big to-do. People respect Pharrell in many industries, if you will, as a pop icon, as an artist, as a designer. A lot of facets to that man and a lot of achievements behind him. And the watch was a fun take on the skull. The skull is a little bit dark. The way they displayed the astronaut made this watch a bit more fun, a bit more relatable to Pharrell, if you will. This thing was crafted from a single piece of hand-engraved red gold. It depicts the view of surface of Mars with Earth in the background, and the turbine peeks out from a cutout on the astronaut suits. They made 30 of these. Original retail price was $969. And of course, as we saw later in the market, that watch was way over its MSRP, trading at about that 2.2 to 2.4 price range. The craziest secondary market price yet realized for a 52 was the $6.5 million for a piece unique known as the RM5201, the Vanitas Vanitantum. Sure, I mangled that, but we'll talk about that later in the show. Let's talk about the Smiley, all right? Talk about a fun watch. Talk about not being afraid of doing something that's just, you know, a bit different, a bit childish, if you will. Not something that goes with the sophistication of what's inside the watch.
Okay, guys, I would never rock that last watch, but these are insane pieces. The craziest watches that you've never seen. These watches are incredible. Sapphire tourbillons, wow. Can you believe it was once under $1 million and now it's selling for almost $1 million more? The mind-blowing RM5601, an exclusive $2 million sapphire watch that went from Jay-Z's wrist to the auction house at $5 million. These watches were inspired by Formula One race cars, ship masts, outer space, race car chassis, like yachts, Memphis Milano, like the Memphis Milano inspired watch, the RM07-01, that was inspired from an Italian design movement and a cultural phenomenon of the 1980s. And they even use technology such as the thin ply technology, TPT. And then that is something that is used in many of the watch brands. Richard Mille is definitely nothing to balk at, even if you can throw the money to balk at such things.
So 2022, this is when they released the Smiley, which had more doodles than, you know, probably a child's coloring book, if you will. The star of the show, obviously, is the Smiley, the iconic image drawn by Franklin Lufrani just over 50 years ago, crafted in yellow gold. 30 pieces limited, $1.2 million list. Again, something that traded a double list and then some. As if a child had a hand in designing this, but this is what Richard Mille is all about. They were never afraid to do something crazy. Like, I look at this watch and it reminds me of the candy collection that they came out with all kinds of candies and colorful pastel colors everywhere for ladies, and RM16 and the 07 and the 37. People were like, oh my God, who the hell is gonna buy that? They sold out in like instantly when they came out. So did this, by the way. The 37, people were like, oh my God, who the hell is gonna buy that? They sold out in like instantly when they came out. So did this, by the way. And of course, moving on to the 2701, 2, 3, 4, etc. All those retail prices that you see up there, pretty much 2x them as a rule of thumb, and this is what you're gonna find these watches out there for. A lot of arguing on the new 2705 in terms of, in general, it doesn't have the same feel as some of the other ones. In fact, my favorite one is going to be the 04 because that literally mimics a tennis racket, but yet all the other ones sort of had the same look and feel to one of the most talked about brands out there in the world. And last, I'm going to finish this off with the Vanitas RM5201 that I mentioned that sold for $6.9 million at Antiquarian back in 2022. It was the highest official price of a Richard Mille sold yet. I don't know of a Richard Mille that sold for more than $6.9 million. I definitely didn't sell one for over $4.5 million. Definitely impressive. And if we look at this watch, it is the sapphire skull. I think this was a combination of peak of the market, peak of the watch market, of COVID peak, if you will, as well as the fact that this is a sapphire turb and it's a skull turb. All the desirable pieces were in place, and I think that's the reason why this watch fetched this much. Would this watch sell for $6.9 million today? Probably not. I would probably say today it fetches around that $4 million price range, as all the other sapphire tourbillons have in the past. People have often asked me, if money was no object, what watches would you go with? I first say the Patek Philippe Grand Complication, the granddaddy of them all. And not the Grandmaster Chime, I go with the Sky Moon Tourbillon. If you want to go from a traditional aspects of watchmaking and innovation, et cetera, et cetera. And the second brand I always go to is Richard Mille. And the ultimate would be for me, and this is a regret till this day, is that I didn't hold on to that very first RM56 Sapphire. Those would be the two watches that I would go with if money is no object. In closing, I could go the cheesy route and say, if you don't understand the price of something, it's probably not for you, but that's just a cheesy way of saying things. What I will say is that Obviously, this isn't for everyone due to the fact that it's price prohibitive. But for those that could afford this watch, I really urge to look at the overall. Look at the brand in its own. Look at the brand from its inception, where it started and where it is today. And you don't necessarily have to be influenced by who's wearing these watches. You can certainly start to get a better understanding as you start to go through the horological innovation the company has gone through, what it does, what it takes to make one of these pieces. But at the end of the day, keep in mind, and I've said this multiple times, there's nothing wrong with a little flex.
Guys, luxury beyond imagination. As far as these watches go, yes, you do see people putting them on while wearing suits. This is, I think, a perfect example of watches that look incredible, but in the wrong context, they look horrible and tacky. And they reveal who somebody is by how they wear it, not the fact that they purchased it. As far as it goes, I think you should take a look at this serious watch brand because that's what it is. It just likes to have serious fun. And this is Daniel with Chronosapien. Hit that like button, bell, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more awesome videos. And we just did a review of Luxury Bazaar. Thank you for tuning in, and good night.